Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me here at the RACV Club in Members Dining Room. We've been very busy today. We've been doing some amazing meals to send out to Victorians in need. So I'm not sure if you've all seen, but we've been doing what we call emergency goods assist, where we're sending out a number of meals to people who are in need and don't have meals at the moment. So there's a lot of people in need. So here at the club, we've been doing 1,500 meals today, all vegetarian, very hearty. So that's what we've been doing at the club while everything's closed. And I'm very lucky to be here today so I can take you through our Kitchen Confidential masterclass about Italian flavors. So I am going to do two different recipes today. What we'll do is a mushroom and truffle risotto, and then we'll do a ravioli, so a goat's curd and pumpkin ravioli. So I'm going to take you through that, and I hope you enjoy it today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll kick it off. So I'm just going to start off with a bit of an error with that one. Just going to start off with a mushroom stock. If you don't have any mushroom stock, or you don't want to make mushroom stock, there's plenty of other stocks that you'll find in the supermarkets. You can get a vegetable stock, it'll work just as well. So in this pan here, so we have a camera up above, a camera on the side, and a camera directly in front of me, so you can see everything that's going on. So we have a pan. We'll just get a little bit of butter in there, and a little bit of olive oil. Just heat that up gently. We'll add some onions, some finely diced onions. Just throw them in, and we'll just sweat them off. So this stock can be made a day in advance, and I'm just going to take you through how to make the stock. I've made it a day in advance. You would normally have this stock and leave it overnight with all the mushrooms in it, and reduce it down the next day, so those mushrooms would infuse all the way through. And we have some lovely mushrooms here today. We've got some, right here, some Swiss browns here, some shimejis here. These are quite interesting mushrooms. You see the shimejis there, beautiful, nice little cap, very nutty flavor. These Swiss browns have got a beautiful full flavor. They're what we call portobello, because they're quite large. They're like a door stopper. That's how the name of portobello came about. So door stopper mushroom, because they're so large. Some more Swiss browns here. And we also have some oyster mushrooms. So if you can see those, Swiss browns in my hand, and these beautiful oyster mushrooms. Now, how are these prepared? How do you make oyster mushrooms? Normally, they form on logs in the forest. So if you go through the forest, you can see them on logs, just popping out of logs. When they cultivate them, there are a couple places in Victoria and Tasmania that cultivate the mushrooms. So what you'll see is a big core of mushroom spores, and what they do with the mushroom spores is they mix them with actually coffee grounds. So they go through around all of Victoria collecting all the coffee grounds. They mix it with the mushroom spores in a bag. So that's a bag, and it's all sort of made into a log like you would in the forest. And then you cut little holes in here. So you cut little holes, and then what happens after about a week, once this is in a sort of a very humid, warm environment, these would start sprouting like you see here. And you can actually pick them off and you see the beautiful mushrooms there. I'll show you that way. Quite amazing, beautiful flavor. I love these. These are actually blue oyster mushrooms. And I love these just cooked off in a little bit of olive oil and garlic. They're quite amazing. So I've sweated off my onions there. Then I'm gonna add some whole garlic, cloves, quite a bit, some porcini powder. This gives a really strong basis of the stock. So you buy porcini powder, or you can buy whole dried porcinis and dry them out, and then just puree them up. And we don't waste anything here at the club. So we have all these Parmesan rinds, the ends and the bits of Parmesan you'd normally throw out. So we keep all those, and then we put it into the stock as well. So we get all the flavor out of the Parmesan. And Parmesan gives you full body flavor as well. Then we have some lovely thyme, straight from the garden on level 2. So we've got a little garden up on level 2 there on the terrace. And then from there, we'll add about 3 litres of water. Some of these little button mushrooms. So we pop that in there, button mushrooms. The rest of the water. And then we'll cook that for around about two hours. And then that'll be our mushroom stock. So after 2 hours, we'd let it cool down, we'd put it in the fridge, we'd leave it overnight. The next day, we'd strain that off. We'll strain that off, and through the magic of television, we've sort of done that already. So after that 3 litres, you want to reduce it down to about 1.3 litres. Now, all these recipes will be given to you at the end of this session. So that's our stock going there. The second part of the risotto is quite important as well. So this part is the mushroom mix. So this will add more flavour to your risotto, and it will also give you a lot of body to it. So instead of just the stock itself, add the butter there, and some olive oil. Now, butter and olive oil is, so you add butter for flavour, and you add the olive oil to keep the temperature down and it doesn't burn. So in goes, we'll start off with the onions and garlic. So we'll sweat that off again. Then we'll add some of these beautiful oyster mushrooms again, and the Swiss browns. Now this needs quite a bit of seasoning. Mushrooms take a lot of seasoning. So don't be scared when you're seasoning your mushrooms. They take a lot of salt, they take a lot of pepper. Salt, pepper are friends of mushrooms. They love it. And you really notice the difference if you add that little bit of salt and pepper to your mushrooms. So that's just gonna cook out. So sweating onions or sweating anything really, is just cooking it off without color. So when you're doing onions or garlic, it's just cooking off on a low to medium heat without any color. If you have a lot of heat and you leave it on too long, it will start burning. Some people will put a lid on top to help them, onions or mushrooms sweat. So I think somebody asked what is the process of sweating? What does that mean? So that's what it means. Just going to give it a toss. And then I've got some about 60 mils of port here. This just adds some more body and flavour to the risotto as well. So we'll just add that in, and then we'll reduce that down. And I'm sorry you can't smell this, but it smells absolutely amazing. Now, something else that's in season right at the moment is truffles. I'll have a little truffle here. I might just shut up the top camera if you can see that. There we are. I'll get really close. So that is a truffle from WA. You can see, you might be able to just see the marbling in there. And the aroma is quite amazing. It's very fragrant. It's got a little bit of hint of garlic, I think, smell. But you can't beat that aroma. Now, these are found in WA. Originally in France, truffles were found with pigs because they actually smell like the male hormone or pheromone. So that's why pigs love truffles. So they used to train pigs to find truffles. Now they train dogs to get the truffles because the dogs won't eat the truffle where the pigs will eat the truffle. So the last thing I added, somebody asked, what did I add last to this dish? It was port, 60 mils of port. That's reduced down nicely. And then what we do from here, we just give it a bit of a taste, just to make sure it's seasoned well. Need a little bit more salt. The port as well gives a lovely sweetness to the dish as well. So what we do with this, and you can do it with any risotto, it's a very good trick to do, is basically cook off whatever ingredients you're using, whether it's mushrooms, whether it's asparagus, whether it's whatever you're using to flavour your risotto. And half of this you would puree, the other half you leave quite chunky and roughly chopped. So you puree half of it really, really smooth. And then when you put this in your risotto at the end, it gives it a really, really full flavour of that mushroom. That mushroom really comes out. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to, half of this, you're going to put it in the Thermomix. The other half we're just going to leave here. And excuse me, make a bit of a mess. So I'll let that blend up. So with the Thermomix now, because I'm not sure if some of you are aware, but the older Thermomixes used to explode sometimes, and hot oil or hot liquid would come out everywhere. So there's a series of questions in there that you have to, on the screen, you have to press and say, yes, I know this is what's going to happen. Yes, I know the lid's closed nicely before it will start pureeing up. So somebody's asking whether there's a right or wrong pan to use for a risotto. I like to use a heavy base saucepan that gives you a nice even temperature, especially because you want to have even temperature across the board. Or in this case, I'm going to do this risotto in this non-stick pan. It's still quite a heavy base on the induction as well. So something that's going to distribute the temperature evenly throughout cooking, because it's very important that you get a very low temperature, slow cooking for when you're making risotto. You don't want to cook it on a high heat, otherwise that will make your risotto all gluggy and not very nice at all. If you don't have a Thermomix, somebody asked, I would, you can just use a any sort of food processor. That would work quite well, or you can chop it up really finely, but a food processor would be just as good. Or even a bar mix or a hand blender. So there we have that puree there. Mix that back into the mushrooms. Make sure we get all that mushroom out. Somebody's just asking if they can use a slow cooker. You can. I haven't actually tried it, but I'm pretty sure you could do the same thing with a slow cooker. I think you'd get the same sort of result. The only thing is with the risotto, you'd normally add your stock in a little bit by a little bit. So I guess you could put all your stock in and use your slow cooker. I've never actually tried it, but I'm sure it will work. Not quite as well, but just, you know, pretty close. So we'll pop that in there. We'll keep that for later. Excuse me. I'm just going to clean out this pan and reuse it for the actual risotto. So we'll start with the actual rice itself. So we'll get that pan going. The stock is here and it's nice and hot. Really important that that stock is nice and hot. Now, like I said, this stock was made the day before. And then from that 3 litre base, we've strained out all the mushrooms. What's left is the liquid. Then the liquid we take from 3 litres down to 1.25 litres. And it's nice and hot. So really important preparation. So all this preparation is done all out through today and all organized. So whenever you're doing any recipe, it's really important that you have organization and everything's ready to go. So I have all my ingredients for my risotto here. I have some butter, 2 lots of butter actually, 25 grams to start with. That will sweat off what we call toasting the rice. So we'll cook that off with some garlic, some finely chopped garlic. We've also got the onions there, some finely chopped onions. We have some risotto rice. This is carnaroli rice, which is a very good short grain rice, which is famous for risotto. So I've actually got my truffle in there. Pop that up. So if you have the truffle in your rice, it'll actually infuse through all your rice. So if I take that truffle out now, I can still smell that beautiful truffle aroma through there. So that goes through your risotto and your rice. And you can do it with flour, you can do it with anything. So an airtight container, this will help keep your truffle longer. And it also aid in some of that beautiful flavor, and it also extends it extends your truffle much longer, much further. Because you, so somebody's asking, what's the difference between black and white truffles? It's more, one is a lot more expensive for a start. So white truffles are around about $4,000 a kilo. Black truffles anywhere from $1,200 to $1,800 a kilo. We don't have any white truffles in Australia at the moment, but we do have the black ones. Now the black ones are winter truffles, so in Australia these are in season at the moment. So onions, garlic. Now this part's really important, that we want to sweat off the onions first, but then we want to coat the rice in all this beautiful garlic, onion, the butter, and the olive oil. And again, olive oil and butter in there so it doesn't burn, but it also gives beautiful flavor from the butter. So somebody's asking about how we take the stock down in size from 3 liters to 1.2. It's just a slow simmer. So you simmer it until it reaches that 1.25. And you can get scales, or you can just do it roughly. But if you have a scale and you weigh this pan and you weigh the stock in it, say 3 liters, and then you can weigh it again a little bit later, and then get it down to 1.2 liters, or you can measure it out into a measuring jug. The mushrooms have been strained. Someone asked if the mushrooms have been strained, and the mushrooms have been strained off beforehand. So before you start reducing it, you strain the mushrooms off. So the stock, you make it the day before, you keep all the mushrooms in it, you cool it down, you put it in the fridge. The next day, you would strain out all the mushrooms, get as much flavor out of it as you can by squeezing it a little bit, and then heat it up, reduce the stock down to 1.25 liters. Okay, now this part's very important. So adding the Arborio rice. Now you just want to toast this off. Now, what makes risotto rice so amazing is that it's got 2 starches in there. So there's one starch on the outside. So if you imagine like an egg maybe, so you have one starch in the middle, which is like an egg, and on the outside there's another starch. Now, if you cook this at a high temperature, that outside starch is going to cook first, and that's why your risotto becomes gluggy. So if you do get that, you've obviously cooked it at a too high a temperature. So if you do it very low and very slowly, that temperature gets into the rice all the way through to the middle and cooks it evenly throughout. So somebody's asking, what about Arborio rice? Yes, Arborio rice is very good. Carnaroli is probably the Rolls Royce. Arborio is probably your stock standard risotto rice. You find it everywhere though. Carnaroli is probably the best. And then there's Acquarello, and there's also an aged Acquarello. So that's almost aged for between 6 to 12 months. And that gives you a really, really nutty flavor. So there's lots of different varieties of the risotto rice. Yeah, like I said, the most common is the Arborio, and Carnaroli is your Rolls Royce. And you want to use a Rolls Royce when you're spending something like a couple of $100 on truffles. So somebody's asking whether you wash the rice. Never do you wash rice for risotto, because it will remove some of that starch of what you need to make the risotto thicken. So I'd never wash Arborio rice. You definitely do when you're making rice for sushi or in Indian cooking or Thai cooking. You always wash the rice, but the Italians don't wash their Arborio rice. It's very important that we want to keep that starch. We don't want to get rid of any of the starch. So nicely toasted there. What we're going to add now, we're just going to turn up the temperature a little bit, and we'll add a little bit of white wine. Now, my thinking about adding wine to cooking, you don't want an average wine. You want a nice, good quality wine that you don't mind drinking. Obviously not something that's top end. You want something that's quite mid-range, something nice, because if you don't have a nice wine, if you use cask wine, it's not quite as good as a nice medium wine, which is, you know, if you put good ingredients into something, you're going to get good quality result. If you put rubbish ingredients in, you're going to get a rubbish result at the end. So now the secret is we're going to drop this temperature down. So once the liquid is gone, the liquid starts disappearing, then we'll just add a ladle full of stock, ladle full of the mushroom stock there. So it's just covering. Now the secret now is that you want to do this very, very slowly, and you want to just keep absorbing all that liquid. Once that liquid's absorbed, you add another ladle full of stock. Now at this point, it's going to take about another 25 minutes to cook. So we'll just slowly simmer that away, and then we'll start sort of going on to the next recipe whilst we wait for the risotto to cook. Somebody's asking where you can get truffles domestically. I believe you could find some at the market. South Melbourne market, the Mushroom Man might have some truffles. It's also essential ingredient. You'll find mushrooms there. So that's the best place to get truffles. Or you have to know someone. So there's some truffles growing around Victoria, and there's lots of, this time of year, there's lots of truffle festivals and truffle events happening. You can normally buy truffles there. Victoria markets, sometimes there's a guy there that sells a bit of truffle. I think I saw him the other week. I think he was there. So Victoria markets, you should be able to get some truffle there. Now, a truffle is not a mushroom, funny enough. It is actually a tuber. Believe it or not. So it's actually grown under oak trees or hazelnut trees. So you see in WA and also Victoria, some of the bigger farms there, they've got lots of hazelnuts and chestnuts or oak trees, and underneath they've put these the spores under through the ground, and then after 3, 4, 5 years they start developing mushrooms. It's got to be the right climate and the right temperature. I just add a little bit more stock. It's got to be the perfect climate, the perfect temperature. Otherwise, they won't grow at all. And it's only really been the last 10, 15, 20 years where we've started to use truffles in Australia, or grow truffles in Australia. Before that, it was only France. So we're getting a very good reputation of how we grow our truffles and how good they are. Brilliant. Next recipe. I'm just going to do a really simple pasta dough. Now this pasta dough, today we're going to make it into a ravioli, but you can also use this for spaghetti, tagliatelle, any pasta. It's a really simple recipe. So we've got some flour here. So we'll throw that in the bowl. 1 egg. Now I use a dough hook to make the pasta. You can use a K-beater or one of these. So one of those. So that's called a K-beater. Why is it called a K-beater? Because Kenwood originally had these, and it had a K on it for Kenwood. So that's why it's called a K-beater. Bit of trivia there. And this is a dough hook because it's a hook and it sort of picks up the dough and mixes it really, really well. So you got your egg, a little bit of oil, olive oil, and you want a little bit of salt. So when I'm adding salt, it's normally about 1%. So if you have 100 grams, I would add 1 gram of salt. If I had a kilo of something, I normally add 100 grams of salt. So then a little bit of water. And then you just want to make this, keep mixing it slowly until it all comes together. And I'm just going back to my risotto, just checking it. Just give me a good stir. So someone's asking if you should continually stir the risotto. You can if you want to stand by the stove for all the time, but I don't feel that you need to. Just every now and then, I don't even stir it. I just sort of give it a mix around. As long as it's staying reasonably fluid, it's fine. It's quite funny sometimes with flour and different flours and different humidities. Sometimes it takes a little bit more flour, and sometimes you need a little bit, a little bit more water, and sometimes you need a little bit less. So on this occasion, it's a little bit more water than what I would normally need. So now it's starting to come together nicely. So somebody's asking what flour would I use? This flour is just a standard flour, but if you want a stronger pasta, and sometimes when I'm making some ravioli where I want it extra strong, then I would use double O flour, so it's that extra stronger flour. And what's the difference between double O flour and normal flour? The double O has got more gluten in it, which makes it hold together better. Whereas cake flour has less gluten in it, and that's why you use it for cakes, so it gives it, allows the cake to, or a sponge to rise. So I'm looking, to get the consistency right, what I'm looking for is for everything to come together. It shouldn't be too too dry, and it should be not too sticky either. But the more I mix this, is the more that it's going to absorb the water, and it's more, the more that you mix it, the more that you work the gluten, and it becomes a stronger dough. Yeah, we will send you the recipes after. So that's a little bit too sticky. So I'm going to pop that back in. It's a little bit sticky there. So now I'm going to add a little bit more flour. So I've gone a bit too far with the water. A bit more flour. That's better. I'm just going to knead this into the bowl a little bit. And that's the sort of consistency you want from the... Now, because I've worked all that gluten in there, and you can start to see it's not sticky anymore. So I've worked all that gluten, worked the flour. Now what we want to do is we need to let it rest. I'll go back to the risotto quickly. A little bit more stock. And that's coming together really, really well. So if you wanted to use a red wine in your risotto, you'd use it when you're doing like a meat-based dish risotto. You can use it in the mushroom risotto if you'd like. It depends on what sort of flavor you want to get out of it. If you were serving it with red meat, so a risotto maybe with some nice game, maybe some quail, using a red wine to reduce down would be fantastic as well. So it should start looking nice and smooth, the pasta dough. Just move this out of the way. Look at that dough is starting to become really smooth. So what we'd do, we'd wrap that up in a bit of Glad wrap. and then we'll save that for later. Now to make the filling, I've got some beautiful pumpkin here. I love using butternut pumpkin, it gives a nice sweetness. So pop that into a bowl. Topping up our risotto once again. Something magical about watching the risotto cooking away, and it just keeps sucking up all the beautiful flavors of that olive oil and the beautiful flavors of the mushroom stock. Once you see the liquid pretty much gone and evaporated, that's when you add a little bit more stock. So again, salt, cracked pepper, I love using big pepper grinders. A little bit of thyme. A little bit of nutmeg as well, just a sprinkling of nutmeg. That's not in the recipe, but if you ever want to flavor pumpkin, nutmeg is amazing to do it. And you can use fresh nutmeg, so little nut of nutmeg, and then you just grate it finely with a fine grater. So somebody's asking, is there a type of glad wrap you can use in sous vide? Unfortunately, not. If you really wanted to, you could wrap it up a lot with glad wrap and tie the ends up, but it's always better to use one of the vacuum sealed bags that normally come with the vacuum sealer. So I'm going to pop that in the oven at 150 degrees for around about 20 to 25 minutes until that all sort of breaks down and becomes nice and soft and caramelized. I'll actually go just put it straight in the bowl and straight into the oven. Or someone's got a very good question. Do you put sauce over the pasta, or do you serve sauce? Sorry, do you put sauce over the pasta, or do you stir the sauce through? Now, it really depends on the pasta. Now, a lot of pasta shapes are designed to really hold sauce. So if you think about orecchiette, nice little small little round pasta, that is something that holds sauce. So that would be something you would toss through so it picks up all the beautiful sauce. And if you've got a ragu, for example, a nice rich ragu, I think somebody asked this question as well, how do you make a nice thick ragu rather than a runny one? And the answer to that is to cook it very slowly for a very long period of time until the tomato breaks down. Any beef or meat that you have in there breaks down and pretty much falls apart. And as much as you slowly reduce that, it will start to become really thick. And that's really good for a pappardelle or a linguine or something like that. So it depends on the pasta whether you mix it or whether you put it on top. So I have the pumpkin puree here. So that's the pumpkin that I just put in the oven, I've sort of done this in advance. I've cooked that off till it's nice and soft. I've pureed that to really, really fine. I also have some beautiful goat's curd, some Meredith goat's curd. That's fantastic. This is the sweetness of the pumpkin with the sort of sourness and the creaminess of the goat's curd, and that becomes quite a fantastic, beautiful flavour. So my risotto is getting actually pretty close. Now, you could just cook it off to about halfway, and then you could put it in the fridge if you wanted to do it for a party or somebody's event the next day. So you could half cook it, put it in the fridge, let it cool down, bring it back out the next day, and then you save half that time. But I always prefer to cook my risotto fresh on the day. If somebody's asking if you had a large party, would you do it all at once or in stages? I would do it all at once if you have a big enough pan, or I might do it in 3 or 4 pots if you have enough space on your stove. It really, really depends. It's funny, I was talking to Rob, our general manager, and he actually makes a risotto and he cooks it almost to the end, but he doesn't add any butter or Parmesan, and he actually freezes it. I thought that was interesting. I wouldn't normally freeze it, but he loves to freeze it, especially in big batches, and then he takes it out and he just finishes it off with Parmesan whenever he needs it. So that way he can do it in big batches. So with the pasta, we just feed it through, and you start at a very big number, so like number 10, depends on your pasta machine, and then you slowly work it through, and you slowly drop the numbers down. Somebody's asking if they don't have a pasta machine, what do we do? You can actually get a rolling pin. You can roll it out with a rolling pin. That's a lot more work, and it's harder to get it at the right thickness. If you want really even thickness, which is really important when it comes to things like ravioli, not so important for other pastas, but yeah. My nonna, she would roll out with a rolling pin. She didn't use a pasta machine, but nonnas are special because they've been doing pasta making for years, and they just get it perfect all the time. So someone's asking about how much would you spend for a decent pasta machine? There's a lot of really good pasta machines around the $150 to $200 mark. This one is about $1,000. It's a bit more commercial. You can get electric ones, which are up to $5,000 to $10,000. So it does vary, but at home, easily get one for between $100 and $150. So somebody's asking if you have to fold the pasta. Now, it's up to you. It depends on how wet your dough is and how it's coming through. You don't necessarily have to fold it. I'm just do timing here. It's looking beautiful, and we're pretty close to the risotto. So that's down to number 1. Now what I'm doing here, I'm just going to, and look how beautiful and smooth that is. I love that. Something that always relaxes me is making pasta and things like This ravioli is one of my favorite dishes. So I've got here a metal ring. So I just pop that down and I put a teaspoon or a little bit of a spoon of I put a spoon of pumpkin on the base, and then I top it up. And I know you can't see this, but it's just a small amount of the pumpkin, and I use the ring. So if you see the ring there, I put a little bit in the middle and I leave about a gap this much. So then I can put the goat's curd, and I can also fold the pasta over. Somebody's saying, can you use a broomstick? Rolling pin or a broomstick? You can use a broomstick if it's, did my nonna use a, sorry, somebody's asking, did my nonna use a broomstick? No, I think she used either a wine bottle or an olive oil bottle. That was her go-to. I've just got an egg here. What this will do is actually, it will seal up the pasta. So I've just cracked the egg. So this is my goat's curd, and I'm just putting on top of the pumpkin. So I think you can just see that. And then the egg, I just use my finger and just outside, basically around the outside, just put the egg around. This helps seal the ravioli. Now, in these times, if you are doing this, I'd recommend with COVID and doing a large party, I would definitely recommend using a pastry brush. But today's just for myself, so I can use my finger. So then you just fold the pasta over the top. As I'm going along, what I'm doing is I'm squeezing out all the air bubbles. Very important. If you have any air bubbles in there, what's going to happen to your pasta or your ravioli is it's going to burst. The air inside will keep expanding and the ravioli will burst. And then with a pastry cutter, so this is about 100 mil pastry cutter, we cut them out. So you can make heaps of these at once. It depends on how big your bench is. So if you have a long bench, then you could make, and I normally used to make 30 or 40 at a time. And then just there, I'm just pinching the edges to make sure all that air is popped out. So I'm just going to show you a bit closer here. So I'm just pinching the edges there. And you want it thin enough so you can almost see through it. You don't want it too thin so it breaks apart when you cook it. So they would normally, I'll put them aside for now. And I'll jump back to my risotto. Now we're getting close. We're getting very close. What I need at this point is for pretty much all the liquid, and I'll take it up here, all the liquid to pretty much disappear. I don't want this too wet because what we're going to add at the end is some more butter. And it's important that this butter is cold and it's cut into cubes. Why is that, do you ask? Well, the reason we add butter at the end and parmesan at the end is because we want to coat all the grains of rice. And somebody was asking, how do you get your risotto so glossy? So that's about this butter and coating the grains of rice. Now, if you have butter that's almost melted and you put this, the butter in there, then what's going to happen is it's going to melt and split. Now, there's a French terminology called monter au beurre, which means adding butter. And what that does, you're making a warm emulsion sauce. So you're actually mixing up the butter with a liquid. So two liquids that don't normally combine, but when you add butter very slowly and cold, it actually slowly melts and they actually combine with the liquid that's in the risotto. And it forms a warm emulsion sauce. So other versions of an emulsion sauce is things like hollandaise, béarnaise. And if you ever have a nice, rich gravy at home and you want to make it thick and glossy and beautiful and add a little bit more flavor, is you can either get some butter, like this, chopped butter, cold butter, and you whisk it in very quickly at the end, and that will make it nice and glossy, but also very thick. You don't want to boil it. If you boil it, it's going to split and separate. Somebody's asking, what is the secret to a great garlic bread? Fresh garlic, nicely finely chopped. I normally make it garlic butter, so I normally saute off some garlic to get flavor in it, and then I'd mix that through some softened butter and a little bit of parsley, and then I would mix that up until it becomes like a whip. Then I'd put it back in the fridge till it sets slightly, and then what I would do, I would just smear that over a beautiful focaccia or a ciabatta bread, or even a sourdough is fantastic. Just rub it on that and then just put it in the oven about 150 degrees and just cook it off nicely until it toasts up and you get that beautiful garlic smell coming through. Some people do long baguettes and cut them down the middle, almost to the end, and then they spread the butter inside. They normally wrap it up in alfoil. They'll cook that off until the butter melts, and then they'll open it up to crisp up the outside. So that's another way of doing it. I'm just going to put some water on for the pasta. At the same time, we're doing the risotto. So we've been multitasking here. Now, that's getting pretty close. I'm just going to pump it up a little bit. Important at this point to taste it. Now, you see how it's sort of separating there? That's pretty good. It's not stodgy. It's still quite nice and moist. At this point, I'm going to add a little bit of salt. And I'm going to add my mushroom puree, and half puree and half of that mushroom mix we did earlier. Give that a good mix through. Somebody's asking, what is the benefit of cooking the garlic rather than the raw garlic? I like to cook the garlic to get a lot of that flavor out already. So if you cook it off in a little bit of butter first, then you'll get that beautiful flavor, that sort of caramelly flavor coming out. But you can also do the raw garlic in the butter, which is quite fine as well, but I prefer to get as much flavor out of that garlic as I can. A really interesting way to do a garlic bread as well, while we're on the subject, is that if you use black garlic, that gives a real bit of a sweetness to it. So you can have your normal garlic, your standard garlic that you'd normally use, and then some black garlic, which is basically fermented garlic. So basically it's kept in a humidified dryer, and it basically dries out, becomes dark and black, and the flavors are really sweet, and it's not that strong pungent flavor, but it's a really deep, beautiful garlicky flavor. So try that. Grab some of that that garlic as well. So I've got a little bit of truffle paste here. So if you really want to give your risotto a bit of a zing, add some of this truffle paste. You can buy that at Essential Ingredient and a lot of other cool stores, that especially the Italian stores. So just mixing that through. Now at this point, then I'm going to add the butter. Black garlic, you should be able to find black garlic in markets, Victoria markets, especially food stores. Chinese actually have, some Chinese stores have black garlic as well. Yeah, you just have to look out for it. Specialty stores definitely have it. See what I'm doing here? I am mixing the butter in. I'm stirring it at the same time. What this is doing is coating all my rice. I'm now adding the finely grated Parmesan, and that, you might think that's a lot, but that's exactly how much you need. Now, you don't put this back on the heat at this point. If you put it back on the heat, then your risotto will separate from the butter and the Parmesan. Then, I know it didn't look like, it looked like a lot of Parmesan, but it is only 50 grams of grated Parmesan. And I like to use this microplane, which grates it really fine, the Parmesan. And also I like to use that grater with my truffle. So I'm going to grate some of the truffle in now. And you can add as much as you like or as little as you like. I like to add a lot. Wow. I'm sorry you can't smell that, but that is amazing. And you see the consistency there? It's just full, like falling off the spoon there. But it's not like, if you put it into a bowl and you turn the bowl out, it wouldn't just set. You don't want that. You want it to be slightly runny. It's meant to move like lava, very, very slowly. So put that aside. So somebody's asking, will this be on the menu in MDR? Definitely in winter. In summer, we'll probably do, hopefully we're back by summer, and we'll do a more summery style, maybe an asparagus risotto, and truffles will be out of season by that point, I would imagine. So there we have the risotto. We will add some more truffle over the top. and a little bit of olive oil. And that is it. So amazing risotto. I'm going to try it. I'm sorry you can't try it. I'd love to send you some, but the Parmesan is just enough seasoning in the Parmesan. You don't need to add extra salt, but it really depends on what you like. But I can really feel the flavor of those mushrooms, the intense flavor, the richness of that mushroom stock. And then it's not too strong, and the fresh truffle over the top just comes through, and it just sort of, wow, just blows your taste buds away. So that's our risotto. I'm going to go back to the ravioli, and we're almost done. We're about 10 minutes over time, but I do apologize for that. But I hope you've all enjoyed today. But I'd like to thank you all. We're just going to pop the ravioli in. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and can't wait to see you for the next one. So because of these are fresh pasta, it will only take a couple of minutes to cook. I've got some basil here. I'm just going to pick that as a garnish. I'm not going to have any sauce with this. It'll just be olive oil with the ravioli, because it only needs just a little bit of olive oil, because you have the really sweetness of the pumpkin in there, and you have the creaminess of the goat's cheese, so you won't really need you won't need much of a sauce. But I will use a little bit of extra this beautiful puree, pumpkin puree. Put that in. So somebody's asking about pasta machine. Where can you buy a good one? Chef's Hat's always very good. Any Italian deli or store will definitely have a pasta machine. Any good Italian shop will have a pasta machine. Just use a slotted spoon. Somebody's asking whether the water is salted. It definitely is salted. I did salt it beforehand. And normally the Italians say you add as much salt until you can taste the sea. Now, this is only for adding flavor to the actual pasta itself. So really important. Otherwise, sometimes the pasta doesn't taste as nice. So yeah, that's why it should be boiling. When you're adding pasta, it should always be boiling, not simmering. I know mine was a little bit under, but I know we're dashed for time, so it should actually be boiling. Add your pasta in, and you want to have at least 3 to 4 times the volume of water to the pasta that you're cooking, because pasta needs to move around. It needs to, and that's why you use boiling water. Pasta needs to move around and bubble around and move. Otherwise, what happens if it's not moving around, you don't have enough water, is that it will stick together, and you don't want that. Because once it sticks together, then what happens is the pasta doesn't cook properly in certain spots, and then you'll get doughy pasta, and then some parts are cooked, some parts are not. A little bit more torn basil over the top. And that is our pumpkin and goat's curd ravioli. Once again, I'd like to thank you all joining us here today. I'm sorry you can't be at the club, but we love to bring parts of the club to you. So I hope you've really enjoyed the 2 recipes that we've done. Otherwise, have a great night and enjoy. Thank you very much.